Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and we are back again for another second video in the Budget Britain series. Last time we took a look at building a budget deck practically just as you start out the game. Definitely very rough around the edges, but that's true of practically any deck you build at such a low level. But today we're going to be adding either the Theaters of War or the Catalyst expansion and seeing how that improves our decks. Both have their upsides and downsides, but definitely I'm gonna admit just straight out that one of these is significantly better if you're going to be playing Britain than the other. But let's not mess around too much and just jump into it. We'll take a look at the Theaters of War. So Theaters of War is actually insanely good for Britain. You get so many really solid cards. The Honey is a staple of like just almost every British deck. It's a good statted tank that also just gives you healing for drawing, and Britain draws a lot of cards. It is just a foundational card for them. You got #1 Commando, which doesn't see the most amount of play but is still a good 2-drop. It being able to kill any unit it damages is a good anti-aggro tool and can be very useful. You have SURREY Regiment, which is just so good. It's just a really solid 3-drop guard, you know, high health. Its attack is just enough that it's going to kill things, but not too much that it's a threat. It's just a very strong card. And even though in higher levels, it's fallen off a little bit for a new player, especially on a budget, this is a fantastic guard. Then we also have BRITANNIA, which is actually somewhat of a win con now. And this is something that we're so happy to get, as BRITANNIA gives us the ability to actually close games out. The enemy, you know, if you have a couple units on the board, you play BRITANNIA and they all get, you know, +2 defense. And then, you know, oftentimes this is like giving units like +6 attack, you know, and that's extremely powerful. It's very easy to just really get out of control. You know, even something like a Honey becomes a 5/5 if it's undamaged. That's really strong. So that's great. On the Japan side, they're a bit less. Some of these cards are more for aggro, but one card that is really solid is the 61st Infantry Regiment, which is just a really solid 4-drop guard that also gives us some extra card draw, which we're always happy to include. So that is, we also run His Majesty's Chosen. This card is not the strongest, but on a budget, just being able to get like the various elites can give you some extra oomph that you otherwise don't have. You know, it's not the best, but it's definitely like for a new player, this is honestly a pretty good card. So beyond that, looking at the list, I've gone over a lot of this in the last episode, but we've definitely trimmed down a lot of the really bad cards. Things like the 5th Brigade and whatnot, you know, just the really weak like infantry and guards and other low impact cards. And we've definitely really improved the deck in terms of its anti-aggro capability and even given it a little bit more power at the top. So just to quickly run over everything, Desert Rats, for an early game card, you know, being able to ping something off, you know, can be useful to finish off enemies, and that pin can help you stall out. First Airborne, it's mostly a 1-drop, because we're kind of lacking in those, but if it comes down, the enemy needs to deal with it, as otherwise it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and cheaper to operate, and it can definitely just kind of get out of control, you know, like it eventually becomes like a 4/4 that operates for 1 and has Fury. That's quite scary, if the enemy ignores it. We got the Swordfish. Swordfish is just a really solid 1-drop. We have Air Superiority. We run a small amount of fighters, but being able to have 1 credit deal 3 is really solid. gives us some useful removal in Britain, which again we kind of lack in. I talked about His Majesty's. It gives you a little bit extra value that you otherwise wouldn't have. Number 1 Commandos. Again, I talked about most of the theaters of war, but this is a really solid anti-aggro card. 3 health is quite a lot, and it's not going to die early on that much. And the damage it deals is, you know, going to kill anything. It's very good at killing off like enemy 1/3s, or it can even just trade down like 1 or 2 enemy units. Just overall quite a solid card. Honey, I've already talked about this. It's like a foundational British control card. It's a decent body, and then when you draw, you get HP off back, or health back. It's just really solid overall. Convoy, we need card draw. Convoy is like the the standard card draw option. It's never bad to have a couple copies kicking around. We run the new SURREY, significantly better than the other guard options we were running last time. For cheap guards, this is one of the best and is definitely very solid. We still run fortifications to give us some good healing to help us against aggro, and also just to buy time against like most decks. Amphibious Assault, we still run this in order to blow up like important small units. Something such as a really annoying smokescreen unit, or some unit that is really running around. It's overall just a nice little removal card. Warhawk, the P40 KITTYHAWK is quite the effective elite, just very versatile. Being able to like kill enemies or hit the enemy HQ for some damage, and it's a decent body. Overall well-rounded. The Lancashire Fusiliers, mostly kind of a standard body, but does a lot of damage. Just really big. It's not the greatest thing, but it can help you kill people, which is nice. We have the 61st Infantry Regiment. It's a decently statted guard that draws us a card when it dies. Just a good card overall. We still have the Zeros. These are flexible 5-drop fighters. Relatively big, annoying to deal with because of the ambush, and that deployment helps you finish off something when you play it. Overall, really good. Churchills. The Churchills are still a bit lackluster as of now. Namely, they still just kind of lack like enough attack for their cost, and they're quite slow. The only reason we really have them in here is because they can be quite strong with Rule Britannia. But definitely, if you have more cards, this is one of the ones you want to replace. We got the Chi Nu in here. The Chi Nu is just an effective guard that can then attack because it's a 4/5 tank. Overall, just a pretty solid guard. Blade of the Samurai is excellent removal for the deck. You know, you just get to kill any enemy unit. Really useful late game to kill that, you know, bomber or whatever that's running havoc on you. Carpet Bombing, just like one of the best British cards. Again, if you have a special wild card and want to play Britain, get a second Carpet. That's one of the first things you should do. Card's insanely good. You also got LEASE, 7 credits to draw 4. It just gives us a strong late game refill. We don't want to run too many copies, and we can't because we don't have the wild. I'm not counting wild cards in this. So the one copy I crafted of LEASE just is here to help us. And then the final card, Rule Britannia, is kind of our win con. We want to exhaust the enemy of resources, and then with our British units, have just even a couple of them on the board, play Rule Britannia, and then kill them with just massive units. Overall, the deck is actually a lot more coherent now, like significantly more. I will say it is still lacking kind of a certain win cons. It doesn't have something like the Commonwealth, which is an elite British order, that would significantly empower this deck. But, you know, we can make do with that. But definitely this deck will suffer a little bit if it lacks win cons. So there is also the argument to run like more like an extra late game card. Like for example, on a budget, it could be a good idea to maybe run like a Lancaster Mark I, you know, just 1 copy, maybe 2, and use these to kill the enemy late into the game. It's up to you whether you want to try that, but that is an option. There is also potentially another way to take this version of the list, and that is somewhat of a pin route. This is a bit weird to do, but can work. Namely, the card that kind of really helps to enable this is the B6N10 Zan. It's a 3/3 bomber, and then when at deployment, you pin an enemy, and if it's already pinned, destroy it. That gives you potentially really hard removal, essentially Blade of the Samurais on 3/3s, if you can pin. If you're going to go that route, I would definitely look to get some more naval operations in the deck. I'd put those back in. I'd also probably look to run, the Type 94 TK if you have any of these. That surprise attack can be very useful, and this is like just usually better than running surprise attack itself. I do want to warn that the pin so far hasn't ever really found success, so be careful investing into that, but that is potentially a way to take it. But that is the Theaters of War list. Now let's look at the Catalyst list. So, just looking at it, I'll just flat out say this is the significantly worse list. Catalyst really didn't give Britain that many tools for on a budget player, and requires kind of building very specific decks to maximize its value. So sadly I can't sort for Catalyst, but just knowing them, the cards we got were Doubting System, number 3 Commandos, the Spitfire Mark II, and Long Range Desert Group. Those are the 4 cards we got from the Catalyst expansion. Now, Doubting System was like last week nerfed. Before it was incredibly powerful, and it is still useful, especially if you're going up against really slow decks. It can be very useful to catch the enemy, but you only ever really want to run a copy or two. Usually that was the standard before, and I expect that's definitely not going to change now that it's both more expensive and misses more. And then Long Range Desert Group is really strong in specific decks, namely Commando decks, but that requires building a very specific deck, and it's difficult to make use of it in long range. In fact, I'm not even running it in the current list. It just really doesn't have a room. On the Japanese side, you have Reorganize, which is more so a combo card. Yamagata Regiment, which is actually an aggro card. You don't want to run it in a slower deck. Sneak Attack is the third and last one, and this is the one we're actually running, giving us 2 more hard removal. But overall, there is just significantly less to put into this deck. So we're still running a lot of weak cards. I put in 1 Doubting System. I think it's a fair thing to say you could maybe you could easily put in a second one, but I just have 1 for right now. Then we have the new Spitfires, and these are 4-credit 5/5s because we have a lot of cheap guards like 5th Brigade and Coldstream. So it's not impossible for this to be good, but it's not game-winning. And then we got essentially just the Sneak Attacks. And although these are like decent value, because Sneak Attack is able to give you some really, really useful value. If you hit a low rarity unit, then you just get to, draw, you get to potentially kill 3 or 4 things at once. You hit like a standard rarity unit that's really annoying you, let's say, zeros, and you hit the first 0 that comes down with Sneak Attack, and suddenly the enemy has to lose all 4 of their zeros. That's potentially quite powerful. But yeah, this list is a lot less refined. I'm not going to go over all the cards again. Most of the same things I talked about applied. But this list is a lot less refined and is a lot more comparable to the original list, where it kind of is just a mishmash of whatever we have alongside some small improvements. So that said, which one is better? Obviously, it's Theaters of War. It's just significantly more worthwhile to use the Theaters of War. Oh, did it delete my deck? Oh, nope, there it is. Okay, that was weird. But it's just, you get significantly more out of it. Like, Theaters of War, like, even if you just want to buy the single campaign for Theaters of War, Britain had the best value, and many of the cards are still extremely useful and played in even meta decks. It's just such a solid, like, it's such a solid expansion that gave so much to the nation that it's really hard to outclass it. Catalyst is a whopping 250 gold, and what it offers to this version, this like budget list, is a lot less appealing. Granted, you do also get cards for every other nation, and some of them, like Germany, for example, got really, really good cards. You know, really, really effective. But overall, Britain is a little left out when you buy Catalyst. So if you're just looking to build a budget Britain, I would recommend going for Theaters of War massively. Even if you don't get the Japanese one, even just the additions of Honey, Commando, His Majesty, SURREY, you know, Rule Britannia, that's so many cards, and it feels a lot more consistent and just performs significantly better. So that said, that was a bit of a quick one today, but that is it. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know how the decks go for you. You know, the German ones seem to perform quite well, so I'm hopeful that these are able to be of use. Britain is hard to build on a budget, and it's something that I'm trying to, you know, build to the best, but even then you can notice kind of holes in the decks. So hopefully this works out for you. Remember, always be willing to tweak decks. Don't take these as the sole best decks. Feel free to take cards out and put other cards in, and especially because these are just templates. These decks do not offer a lot of really strong, well, they don't take into account any like wild cards or any packs you've opened from when they went to when I made them. I made them with only the stuff in the original budget list, and also then just the single expansion. So they're definitely like less powerful than what your decks will be, but this is just a good template. So try it around, leave a comment, let me know how it goes, and thank you all so much for watching. Have a good day.